So it's about 12:02. About 12:02, I see we have participants joining us. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening. And this of course depends on whatever jurisdiction you may be from. I mean, I know we have people who have just woken up in other countries who are going to sleep, but they've decided to stay up for this particular webinar. So as we allow participants to join us, we can give them 1 or 2 minutes before we officially start this particular session. This particular juncture, I will just take a few minutes to just do a bit of housekeeping as we wait for the rest of the participants to join us. So welcome all. We're glad as the Institute of Directors to have you all joining us for this particular session. So if you have friends, colleagues, board members, directors who you feel should be here, kindly just tap them. You can poke them if you're on Facebook. You can just let them know that they're missing out on a conversation that will definitely help them rethink how they look at matters, change management, conflict management, and that. So again, once more, as everybody joins us, it's good to basically have a few housekeeping rules for us all to embrace, at least during this particular Zoom call. On your Zoom screen, at the bottom of your screen, you should be able to see a chat functionality and a Q&A section. Please feel free to jot down or to pose any questions to any of the panelists, and that should be handled at the end of the presentations, or either way, it can also be done and tackled amidst the presentations going on, depending on how pertinent the questions may be, and that can be addressed by each panelist. Reverend says normally that every organization pays a price for mismanaging conflict, but few know how much. So every organization pays for mismanaging conflict, but few organizations know how much they pay for that. And on the other hand, in his book, this is Wale Akinyemi, My Chocolate is Melting. I don't know whether any of us have come across that book, My Chocolate is Melting. And matters change management. And from where we sit, one of the most important things we need to notice that many times conflict arises due to lack of accepting change that's coming, lack of accepting ourselves for who we are, and that we can actually be able to accommodate each other. So if you have a chance after this, please get in touch with Wale. You need to grab a copy of that book, My Chocolate is Melting. Almost resonating with Who Moved My Cheese. So be kind enough to yourself to get a book, and as people and the rest join us, allow me at this particular juncture to hand over to Margaret. Margaret is going to be the moderator of this particular session today. Margaret is a board member of the Institute of Directors and certified, actually, mediator on that regard. She is best placed to take us through running the show today, at least during this particular session. She is the chair of the Membership and Publicity Committee of the Institute of Directors, Kenya. So Margaret, without further ado, allow me to decrease so that you may increase and have this particular session run. Asante sana. Welcome.
Thank you, James. Thank you, our panelists, Dr. Ari and Reverend. It is indeed a pleasure to moderate this session. Participants, wherever you are, karibuni sana, you are most welcome. I am privileged to get us started, and without taking much time, Ronald Reagan, the US president said that peace is not the absence of conflict. It is the ability to handle conflict by peaceful means. If there is somebody who handled conflict, those who remember his reign, it was President Ronald Reagan. Conflict will arise in the boardroom and indeed all around us. How we handle it is going to determine how fast we get out of a potentially acrimonious situation. When conflict is not handled properly and expeditiously, it may lead to serious consequences for both the company and all that it stands for, the shareholders, and even the society at large. And so today, we are privileged to have with us experienced panelists who bring into this webinar a wealth of experience and insight. I will start with the Reverend, who is going to be our first speaker. Reverend Geoffrey Njenga is a trainer and a consultant in corporate governance. We in IoD cannot say enough about corporate governance. Reverend is an accredited mediator, and so handling and resolving conflict is one of the things that he does probably on a daily basis. This morning I was teasing him that this is his bread and butter. Reverend is also a trainer of mediators. As indicated in his title, he is a priest with the Anglican Church attached to the All Saints Cathedral. He is a marriage counselor as well. And I am happy to note that Reverend is a member of the board of Women on Boards Network. This is also a pet subject of IoD. And so today we couldn't have had a better panelist than Reverend Geoffrey Njenga. I know there is a lot I should have said about you, but I will leave it to you to say it in the best way possible. Our second panelist, who should be conspicuously there, looking good in his African attire, is Chief Daktari Wale Akinyemi. Daktari told me this morning he's a Kenyan of Nigerian descent. And we are happy to welcome you into IoD and indeed into this seminar, into this webinar. Daktari is a business strategist. He is an author, and I dare add a prolific author with many titles to his name. One of my favorite is The Billionaire Within. And Daktari, I can say this billionaire is about to come out. And Daktari is also a newspaper columnist. We may have read his thoughts in our newspapers. And he's also an inspiration speaker. So Daktari, in this era of COVID-19, we are also looking up to you for some inspiration. I could say much, but you will agree with me that I wouldn't say it better than him, even if I tried. So I will let Daktari fill in where I have left by way of self-introduction. And so it has been said that 10% of conflicts are due to difference in opinion, but 90% are due to the wrong tone of voice. And today we are looking forward and looking up to you, Daktari and Reverend, to say it in the right tone of voice for the benefit of all our participants in this webinar. Without further ado, I want to now welcome Reverend Geoffrey Njenga to take us through his presentation. And as James has said in the opening remarks, we encourage all of you, our participants, to send in your comments, your questions. We shall have a Q&A towards the end where our panelists are going to be able to engage with your questions. So, Karibu Reverend, your time. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Margaret, and the panelists. And thank you very much, all the participants. It's my greatest joy to share in a short while conflict management mechanism for boards. You know, I think, Margaret, you're right when you say that the tone of voice is very important. When I teach communication in matters of conflict resolution, one of the things that we discover in that teaching is that well over 75% is you can communicate many things without opening your mouth. So we need to be careful. We can begin big conflicts when we say absolutely nothing because people are watching. So yes, indeed, we need to be careful what we do, where we do. I want to move, James, I want to move my slides. Can you make that possible? I did it earlier, now it's not happening.
Yes, let me...
I have done it, I have done it.
Very good.
So I think we should begin with the beginning. What is conflict? And if I were to go around all the participants, perhaps each one of you would have your own definition of what conflict is. But let's go to this particular one, which may probably summarize all the things that you could say about conflict. It is in a situation in which people have apparently incompatible opinions or goals or interests or principles or even feelings. That may summarize all what we may want to say about conflict. Incompatible opinions and goals and interests and feelings and principles.
Reverend, your slides are not visible.
My slides are not visible. Then let's make them visible.
Right. You can
Are
share.
they now?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Just share. Click on share at the bottom of your screen.
It is actually not there. Ooh.
Let me share them on your behalf, kindly.
If you can,
yes.
If you can do that.
Okay. All right, we are good to go.
What is conflict? You have that one? Number 2.
Okay.
Are you there?
Yes. Can you see it?
I can see it myself. I just wanted to know that everybody can.
Yeah, I believe everyone else can. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay. So we did define conflict, and we were just about to talk about factors which can lead to conflict in the board. There can be many, and indeed there are very many issues that can bring conflict in the board, including stress caused by COVID-19, also known as coronavirus. But some of those factors leading to conflict on the board include conflict of interest. And this is, we are very much aware that some people may have, or people when they come together, they can have divergent interest, even though they are serving on the same board. Or fear of risk. Some people are risk averse, and they may be very uncomfortable with the positions coming from the board as to where they should go. If one thinks that perhaps that would be too much risk, they can then choose not to go, and that may cause conflict. Or we can have emotional attachment to certain matters, and you have people talk about my people, or me, or my people syndrome. They have an emotional attachment either to where they came from or the people they know, their ethnic background, and if there is a matter that may be affecting their region, their man or woman, that can create a lot of problem because of that emotional attachment. It can also be lack of competence. Someone is simply not qualified to serve on that board. And this can be mainly in state boards or public corporations, where you have people who come in not because they are competent, but perhaps for regional tribal balances or for whatever other reason, but they're really not competent, and that can create a problem on the board. Or lack of transparency, or even not providing enough information. Or there can be no clear, it may be that there are no clear rules on decision making, or the board member, the particular board member, does not clearly understand the rules for the board, how things get done there. So those are some of the reasons for the board. Now, I am going to be talking a lot about mediation as a dispute resolution mechanism in the board. Mediation is one among many, but this is the one I'll recommend very highly. Now, we need to remember that disputes are inevitable in the society, and so also on the board. It is not if, but when. It is not if, but when. And this is true, even of those who may claim to be madly in love with each other. It is not if, but when disputes occur. But disputes are very dangerous to a board because they can cause great damage. And if they damage the board, they obviously damage the company. However, I think we need to also accept that disputes are not always negative. And this we know because most inventions were the result of disputes. So the key thing is how disputes are resolved. Also, why you are having disputes, why the dispute, and also why and how you resolve that. And the board must develop conflict resolution skills. If you do not have conflict resolution skills, you are likely to damage the board. So I will be recommending very highly that we think as boards, as members of the board, whether you do have conflict resolution skills. So there are various ways of resolving conflict, as we know. It could be the rule of the jungle, which is survival of the fittest, not necessarily the best. It is survival of the fittest. Those who have the muscles, they have the body strength, they can outwit other people, they can take advantage, they can manipulate. That's the rule of the jungle. You survive because you are fittest to fight the battle, not necessarily because you are the best. Or you can choose litigation process, and board members have taken each other to court because they have chosen the litigation process. There are a few other mechanisms that we will encounter as we go down, but I would want to recommend mediation. I have seen it work over and over, even in board situations, and resolve some very, very difficult situations. So mediation there. But what is mediation? Firstly, mediation is about sustainable peace. Sustainable peace. And mediation is a process where those in disputes are helped by a neutral third party to negotiate mutually beneficial solutions to their disputes. So you come to the table in mediation to participate in negotiating what really matters to you. You know, in boards or wherever else there would be disputes, it's about people not having what they think they deserve or they want. In mediation, you come to the table, therefore, to negotiate for something that is of interest to you, without forgetting the interest of the other person. Now, of course, this is different from the Stone Age command and control, where somebody says, I said so, and you've got to do what I have said. Well, more like, you know, they tell you to jump, and they expect you to ask how high. So mediation is better than the rule of the jungle, because it brings people together to talk about what matters to each individual. Now, there are different types of mediation. You have self-mediation, which helps you to work with others. This is some kind of a self-help tool, or mediation without a third party. This is where the mediator plays the double role of first, he as a disputant, because you are the aggrieved party, and also as the mediator. This happens very well at the place of work between a senior person and a junior person. Or mediation with a third party, this involves a trained, neutral third party. Workplace mediation is a critical tool for peace at workplace, and every board should be careful to ensure that there is mediation at the workplace happening at all levels. So we call this area alternative dispute resolution mechanisms, or ADR. And the question is, it is alternative to what? This ADR is alternative to litigation. You know, litigation is what happens in the open court. And litigation is about win and lose. The judge will determine, or the magistrate will determine a matter based on two things: evidence and the law, and is obliged to give it to one and take it from the other. And that's where you have the win-lose outcome in litigation. It does not necessarily resolve the conflict. It may determine the matter, but litigation does not resolve the conflict. As a matter of fact, after the gavel has hit the table, the dispute escalates, and people can go to the next court and then to the other one. And when all that fails, perhaps physical fight, and people have been killed because the matter was never resolved. Now, mediation is about win-win. Why? Because I come to the table of mediation to negotiate for what matters to me and the other person. And although we may begin at extreme ends, it's possible to find a common ground. The board members could be fighting over an issue because one has taken one extreme end and the other one has taken the other extreme end. It's possible to come up with a win-win where we find a middle ground. But there are also other dispute resolution mechanisms. And here I'm thinking about negotiation. Again, not very different from mediation. People come to the table to argue, to present, to negotiate for what matters to them. Or conciliation. Conciliation is also called shuttle diplomacy. The mediator or the conciliator moves from one disputant and then to the other, taking information from one and then to the other, so that he can somehow find a working position. For those who are familiar with government of national unity that we had in this country some years back, it came as a result of this conciliation by Kofi Annan, moving from the president and the former prime minister, and somehow finding a working position for this country in forming the government of national unity. Or arbitration. arbitration is not very different from litigation. Arbitration, in actual fact, is a private judicial process. And then, of course, mediation. All those are in that basket called alternative dispute resolution mechanism. How does mediation relate to the laws of Kenya? It is anchored in the new Kenyan Constitution 2010 in Article 159(2). That supreme law is the one that gives the legs, so to speak, for mediation. And the judiciary has actualized that article, that provision of the Constitution to create court-annexed mediation or court-mandated mediation, in which, and now it's been running for about 6 years, I think, the judiciary has been resolving matters through mediation by using accredited mediators. And I am one of those. Mediators are accredited by the Mediation Accreditation Committee of the Kenyan Judiciary to resolve matters from court. So what the court does is to send matters to the accredited mediators to resolve matters. And a lot has happened in resolving matters through court-annexed mediation. Now, questions have been asked, does mediation work? And I'm here to say mediation works. I've used it in workplace disputes. I know it works. I have used it in succession matters. I know it works. I have used it in marital matters. In fact, there is one right now on my table. I know it works. It works even for those who either are coming from a divorce court or are going there. It is very interesting because it works very well to help them resolve the problems between them. Of course, mediation does not grant you divorce. It works in community matters and even in commercial matters. I've done quite a number of them between the architects and their clients, between the banks and their customers, or in contractual matters. You know, any dispute can be mediated if there was willingness or commitment. Any dispute, because the dispute, the mediation brings the disputants together. They come together to negotiate for what is in their best interest. So if those two parties are willing, any dispute can be mediated. What are the advantages of mediation? And every board member ought to look at this, and we will be zeroing in more on these advantages on the board. The first one is mediation is about self-determination. What do I mean by that? It gives power to the disputants. Now, let me explain. If you are in litigation, you surrender your power, every bit of it, to the advocates. They work for you. They argue for you. In fact, they fight for you. And you know they are trained to fight. So they have all the power. You may be in court for 20 years, but you didn't open your mouth even once because you gave the power to your advocate to fight for you. The little power that may be remaining is given to the judge or to the magistrate. After receiving all the presentations and submissions and everything else from the lawyers, then they will make a determination. And then you walk out having never opened your mouth and therefore completely powerless, really. But mediation is self-determination. It is the two parties coming together to talk about what matters to them. And when they talk, they become very empowered because it is their problem, not any other person's problem. Another advantage of mediation is efficient. A conclusion, an agreement can be achieved within 3 or so meetings, or even less. I have closed a matter within 1 meeting. A matter that was in court for 10, 15 years, you discover it can be closed within a very short period of time. When people talk, many things can go right. great things happen in actual fact. So it is highly efficient. It is also voluntary. People choose. Board members would take mediation as their default mode. And they say, when we have a dispute in this board, we will go for mediation. So they voluntarily choose to go to the table. Mediation deals with interests and not rights. Litigation is about rights. What my rights are under the Constitution or whichever legal provision, my right. That is the province of litigation. But mediation is about interest. What matters to me? What is of great importance to me? And that gives it a very interesting twist, because when my interests are met, I can walk away from the dispute. And I've seen that happen over and over and over. Once my interests are met, I can walk away and leave the dispute completely. Another interesting thing about mediation is that it deals with emotions and issues. Let me explain. The court process, litigation, has no place for emotions. The judge wants to hear facts, and facts only. The lawyers will present facts. Of course, we know that facts and truth are also very different. Facts can be created, and they have been created. However, the judge wants to hear facts. Those are the issues. However, we know that most of the disputes are about injured emotion. Something happened, somebody said, or someone looked at you in a certain way. And I think that is what Margaret was alluding to. And that can cause a lot of problems. Now, in mediation, we give room for venting, speaking out, expressing your emotions. I have seen very huge problems solved simply because for the first time, someone had a chance to vent out, to talk, to express themselves. And we know that venting is therapeutic. A very, very important thing in mediation. It's also informal. You know how formal our court processes are the world over. Mediation is informal. We can meet in my office, we can meet in a restaurant, we can meet in a home, we can meet anywhere as long as the conditions allow us to meet there and really conduct this business of mediation. And finally, on this screen, it repairs relationships. And we know relationships really are the essence of life. If you are able to deal with relationships, if you're able to have healthy relationships, you are likely to go very far in your life. How does the process of mediation work? It begins with a commitment to resolve the dispute. If the board members are in conflict with each other, they choose, they say, we will resolve the dispute. And this is the decision to mediate. It also involves a commitment to talk. And this is face-to-face talking about the problem. You know, when you're in dispute, the last thing you want is to look the other person in the eye. You would want to avoid. But this is, it's a commitment. Mediation must have a commitment for people to sit and talk. And then it has some ground rules that we will remain in the process until we find a solution. No walk away. Again, we will not impose decisions on each other. No power play. Those are important ground rules in mediation. And then you have some natural processes that would be working behind as you continue with the process of mediation. We call them forces towards harmony. Fatigue is one of those. People get tired by dispute. You know how it is. If you're a couple at home and you're fighting, you get very tired. It's true also on the board that people get tired. Or catharsis. This is a relief that comes when you express yourself. And then human beings have a desire for peace. It will be working in the background. Or then inhibitory reflex. If you are not aggressive, the other party is not likely to be aggressive. If you say, I am sorry, I didn't know that hurt you, it's likely that the other person will say, I'm sorry too. And then you reach a breakthrough. And a breakthrough in mediation is really a change of attitude. When people are fighting, we are pointing fingers at each other. It is you, board member. It is you, chairman. It is you. And then they point the finger to you. You reach a breakthrough after talking about the problem where the attitude changes from me against you to us against the problem. What a beautiful place to be. That the board members finally discover the problem, and they are on one side and the problem is on the other side. They can deal with it. After that, then you can develop options. What options do we have to resolve the problem? And then you write an agreement. Say, from now on, this is how we are going to relate. This is how we are going to deal with problems. This is how this matter has been resolved. And you can have a follow-up process to just make sure a month, 2 months, 3 months that you have followed up and the problem has been resolved appropriately. Conflict costs a lot in the board and in the company. James said earlier at the beginning that many people have no clue how much they lose in conflict. When people are fighting, when the board members are fighting, you're wasting each other's time, and you're also wasting the time of the company. It doesn't really matter who is in the right or who is in the wrong. The fact of the matter is that a lot of resources are being wasted. And that's not why you've been hired. That is not why you sit on the board. It also involves lost performance due to conflict. You can spend 45, 50, 60% of the time just discussing the problem. You are wasting time. You are messing up performance due to that conflict. And that can come with lost opportunity. And companies have lost business because of fighting. It also degrades quality of decisions because you are angry at each other. And you may not even have all the information because board member X is keeping certain elements of information that would be useful in the making the decision. And then health costs. People have become physically sick because of the stress in the workplace, in the board, and in the company generally. Why mediation is resolving conflict in the board? Why mediation? Because it restores dignity. We said it's a win-win outcome, which means it protects personal pride. And that thus restores dignity. It maintains confidentiality. All the information that is handled in the mediation process must be held in confidence. So it maintains confidentiality. Of course, if you go to the court of law, that is a public place. And anybody can pick that and write about it. It's efficient, it is quick, dispute resolution mechanism, it enhances teamwork. Why? Because it repairs relationships and therefore enhances teamwork. It is relatively less expensive. We know that legal fee can run into millions and millions. Of course, you will pay the mediator if you ask me to come and do mediation for your board members, but it will not be anywhere near what the lawyers will pay you, and it will not take as much time. It saves time and money, repairs relationship, and then you can have sustained peace. It also maintains public image, that you are not projected in the wrong light out there. It avoids public scrutiny and therefore protects the institution's image and reputation. It promotes good and effective leadership. Disputes will chase away business, and it can destroy business. Disputes can destroy companies, and we know companies that have been destroyed by dispute. So there are very many advantages of using mediation to resolve disputes or even to handle other difficult situations in the organization. Now, for those of you who are from this republic, you know that we've had some very nasty boardroom battles in Brand, Kenya. Destroyed a board there. Nairobi Hospital has gone through a serious and nasty boardroom battle. And Kenya Re did go through some nasty Boardroom battle not too long ago. And Kenya Ports Authority has not even, I think, fully recovered from some very nasty boardroom battles. So, and I'm sure you can add to that list others are known to you. Now, we need to promote mediation in the board. And what can you do? And I'm now headed to the end of my presentation. You can actively recommend or promote mediation for dispute resolution in your board. That is probably the best thing you would do for your board, because you will be pitching for sustainable peace. You can take personal responsibility to understand how mediation works and take training. What I am sharing here takes at least almost 50 hours to get to understand fully how mediation works. You are only getting a very little portion of what is involved in this thing called mediation. We can encourage HR practitioners to adopt mediation as the default method in dispute resolution. In this country, the default in dispute resolution is the court. See you in court, or my lawyers will write you, you know, and what they don't tell you, you're going to be there for a very long time and waste a lot of money and effort and emotions. And then at the workplace, have rooms where mediation can be practiced right across from the top to the bottom. We see about that is always fighting. Peace is a vital factor of an effective board because you will have increased productivity. You want to work in a nice workplace. It is healthier to be in a nice workplace, and it contributes to healthy lifestyle. And that can begin from the board down to the company, and also when you go home, because you are going home a fulfilled, happy board member. And then when you go there, a fulfilled husband or wife, and a father or a mother. So this is important for the board to aim to have sustainable peace. You know, we talk about Monday blues. My own suspicion is Monday blues is about people not wanting to go back to the battles at the workplace. Because you see, you know where you left it on Friday. Then you went and had a beautiful time over the weekend. And now you have to struggle to get to that office and get involved in those battles once again. I think we can do better as board members by creating sustainable peace for our companies. Now, there are business rules that support mediation. Some of us are aware of Mwongozo. Others, you may be aware of CMA Code, King Fall Report, the Kenyan Constitution, like we have seen earlier, the Judiciary of the Republic of Kenya. All these recommend mediation for dispute resolution mechanism. So you're not alone, and you're not throwing yourself in midair. You are in good company when you talk about mediation for your board. And Margaret talked about this, and this is my final presentation. Margaret talked about this. Ronald Reagan said, peace is not the absence of conflict. We know conflict is inevitable. It is the ability to handle conflict by peaceful means. And my hope and my prayer is that those who are on the board will learn to handle conflict by peaceful means for their own benefit, for their own health, for the benefit of the company, and even for their families and other stakeholders. Thank you very much. James, Margaret, over to you.
Margaret, you need to unmute. Sorry, just unmute yourself.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Reverend. Mm-hmm. It has been such an enriching 30 minutes of an inspiring journey through conflict mediation, through conflict resolution in the board, and focusing on mediation. Thank you so much, Reverend.
You're welcome.
Our participants, and before I say that, Reverend,
Yes.
you talked about Monday blues.
Yes, I talked
about and I agree with you. People are not looking forward.
Yes.
But I'm also thinking, now that you are also a marriage and family counselor, could
Yes.
it be that these people are coming from the battlefield in the weekend?
Yet one more. Yes, that might as well be Margaret. Might as well be true, Margaret. But we are saying at least deal with one, and if you dealt with the good, perhaps you may also have skills to deal with the other one at home.
Exactly. Thank you so much, Reverend. We have some questions coming from our participants.
Right.
I have Sultan Amri Nasur asking, conflict is multifaceted. Is it true? And he goes on to say philosophic, psychology, legal, spiritual. And I just want to say, Reverend, if you could just hold it right there. After Daktari, we shall have a short session of responding. Yeah, there are also some of our participants who are sending chats, and one of them is asking, does IoD have a process of a mediation committee, probably? And James, I believe you'll be able to talk about that. Some are asking for us to share the webinar materials, and I believe James is on top of that. And so now, Reverend, as you take a breather and maybe a cup of tea, hopefully, I would want us to bring in Daktari. He has been on standby, and I believe he has something good for our participants. So, Daktari, karibu sana. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much indeed for having me, Reverend. Thank you. That was really, really rich. And you know, it's always good to speak after the boss. You know, so I can just be saying, like Reverend said, you know, like Reverend said. So I will start by saying, like Reverend said, we never should underestimate the time-wasting potential of conflicts in the board. Not just time-wasting, but also the loss to the business. You know, time that we could have been constructively building things to take the organization forward. You know, having been involved in many situations where things just stand still. So certain things cannot happen because some people have refused to agree. And anybody who underestimates the potential for destruction that comes with not being able to agree to disagree. Have you thought of the fact that when you look at wars, when you look at conflicts around the world, at the very root is that some people could not agree on something. So I want to take it from that perspective of the personal, you know, the personal side of things that, and you know, like, again, like you said, conflict is a way of life. You can't avoid it. You know, as long as you're alive, as long as you are thinking, as long as you have opinions, there will be people who do not agree with your position. So it's a way of life. And one of the things that I'd like us to really hammer in is that the strength of a relationship is not in the absence of conflict.
That's correct.
It's not. So you don't have a good relationship necessarily because there is no conflict. It could be that you've suppressed things, you know. So the strength of a relationship is not in the absence of conflict, but in the ability to always come back stronger after the conflict.
Mm.
You know, I think that is very, very important, because there could be a deception in some circles that, oh, well, we don't have conflict, we are doing well. Not necessarily. Just like, oh, we have a lot of conflicts, so we are not doing well. Not necessarily. You might find out that where you actually have conflict is a more vibrant, stronger board than the one where you don't have any conflicts at all. And I'm going to explain that, you know. But another thing that I think is crucial is predetermination of how to deal with the conflict before it arises. You know, I think that is very important, that, all right, guys, we are going to work together. These are the issues that might bring conflict. And when these things do arise, it's not a matter of if. When they do arise, let us agree together that this is how we are going to deal with it, because of the bigger picture and because we want to preserve the organization and the intent, not just the business of the organization, but the integrity of the organization, the reputation of the organization. So I think it's very important that we predetermine how we are going to deal with the conflict before it arises. Now, this may not necessarily stop conflict from coming, but it means that you will respond to things, not react. And I think that's very, very crucial. Another position that will help each one of us is this, and you know, this happens in marriage, it happens everywhere, and that is the fact that I am correct does not mean you are wrong.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because I think one thing that always flares up a lot of these things is that I am right, therefore you are wrong. You know, and there can be nothing more misleading than that. All right. So we can both be right, but we are looking from different perspectives. We can both be right. And if you do not make an allowance for that in your thinking, you will not create the mental infrastructure to handle conflict, because you will always be, you know, believe that the other person is wrong. And once you believe the other person is wrong, that puts you have an air of superiority, that I am correct, they are wrong. So don't get sucked into that. The fact that I am right does not mean you are wrong. Because a great threat that I have seen to a lot of successful boards in organizations is where we have not created an environment for divergent views to be expressed. You know, in a lot of our culture, divergent view is seen as rebellion. Let me tell you the danger of that. Malcolm Gladwell wrote a book. I can't remember which one of his books. Maybe it was Outliers or so. And he talked about the fact that there was a time when the airline with the worst record for crashes in the world was Korean Airlines. Now, and they began to figure out what is responsible for this consistency in crashes and, you know, mishaps with Korean Airlines. And in that book, he said, well, what they did was to change the official language to English. And once they changed the official language of the airline to English, he said the crashes stopped. Now, you might wonder, what is language? What's language got to do with it? But apparently, he wrote in that book, he said that the Korean language is a very, very respectful, deferring language. So there's a tone, and Margaret talked about the tone earlier. There's a tone that you cannot use when talking to an older person or somebody who is senior. There's a tone you can't use. So what happened when there were even when a co-pilot can see that something is not going right, there is a tone he could not use to communicate a sense of urgency to the pilot. And so instead of a sense of urgency, it was more like a passive thing. And you can read the book, Malcolm Gladwell, I think it was Outliers. He said, so let me give you an example from what I saw, you know, what I deduced from it. So you see that maybe the instrument is saying that, okay, maybe we're low on gas, on fuel, or something like that. Instead of saying, boss, we have a problem, the tone is, you know, it appears as if we may have a problem. Now, so you are not able to convey that sense of urgency. And that's exactly like the Yoruba language. Because in my language, when you want to talk to an elder person or talk about an older person, you don't talk to them in the same tense that you're talking to somebody that is your age, you're younger. So in fact, literally, when you're talking about an older person, you will say, you go to plural. So like someone like Reverend now, instead of saying he is there, I will say something like they are there, talking. Now, so when you have that environment, you know, they are there. So when you have that environment where divergent thought, views are not, and they are seen as rebellious, we will not, I mean, the conflict is just a time bomb waiting to happen. All right? When we don't have an environment for expression, what we will have is that things will get bottled up and bottled up and bottled up, and then one day, boom, there will be an explosion. What we are seeing in America right now is a manifestation of bottled up issues and now the explosion. So it is so important to create an environment where different views can be expressed, remembering that the fact that you are right does not mean somebody else is wrong. When we don't have that right environment that augurs well for expression, there is another danger that lies there that can totally mess up the organization. And that danger is for decisions to always go in the way of the most dominant personality and not necessarily in the way of the best ideas. Now, that dominant personality, it may be dominance by age, it may be dominance by position in society, it may be dominance by just their personality. If we don't create that environment for equal expression, you will find a situation where you may be having conversation and then this personality says, well, this is the way, and everybody goes, yes, sir. And that's the end of that. That's the end of that. Of course, later on, when things now go bust, you now begin to, you know, your claim to fame, you'll be telling other people that, oh, you know, when he said it, I did not agree, but I just kept quiet. That is the problem. That is the problem right there. All right. So this is creating an environment for expression and low level of trust. Conflicts are waiting to erupt. Once we have low levels of trust, that is where different form along certain positions, and then, you know, before you know what's happening, you're having a civil war. Communication is very key to establishing an environment of trust. Is crucial. Now, I'm sure a lot of companies, a lot of organizations try to, you know, when the conflict is erupting, they patch things up. I know I'm going to step on many toes with what I'm about to say. So thank God it's on Zoom, so you can't catch me. But many times when this happens, we try to patch things up with a deception that we call team building.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that deception called team building, we try to use it to patch things up. So, okay, let's go to Naivasha, let's go somewhere. Listen. No team has ever been built because two groups did tug of war. No team has ever been built like that. Mm-hmm. In fact, let me explain it to you. If we go that way, and we go and, you know, maybe we have games and do all that, it's a time of bonding, but it does not build a team, because teams are built when you have a meeting of minds. All right? So we can have all that. Maybe go on a Friday, and we have not dealt with the demons that were troubling us on Thursday. We left those demons there. By the time we come back on Monday, those demons, that's what Monday, like Reverend was saying, those demons say, oh, you went to Naivasha, Karibu, from where you stopped. You know? So you don't build a team that way. You know, it's built by a meeting of minds. And that meeting of minds happens through open communication. Open communication cannot happen if you've not the environment for diverse thoughts and diverse ideas. Then another thing that I found out is that a lot of conflicts happen not because the guy we're dealing with is bad. It's just that we don't understand the guy. You know? So knowledge of who you are dealing with is very crucial in handling conflicts. You know, there's let me give you a very practical thing. So you have somebody who has been, you know, has succeeded, has worked his way to the top. He's got years of experience behind him and is an icon. And he believes that he arrived at the icon status by doing A, B, C, D, E. He believes that that is what is responsible for his success. Then you come and you begin to tell him that he has to change his ways. He's going to ask you, change to where? Because he already feels this is how I got here. There was a time I was giving a lecture on the founder's syndrome. You know? Now, the guy has suffered, he knows the history of how he started this thing and all that, and then you suddenly show up and say, my friend, you have to change the way you are doing things. And he will say, change to where? This is what I did to get here. This is what I did to be able to bring you on board. Then you are saying I should change. You know, to where? And that is why knowledge of who you are dealing with is important. there was something I read some time ago, and they said it was a transcript of a radio conversation between a US naval ship with the Canadian authorities off the coast of Newfoundland, sometime in 1995. And it goes like this. The Americans say, please divert your course 15 degrees to the north to avoid a collision. The Canadians respond, we recommend that you divert your course 15 degrees to the south to avoid a collision. Then the Americans reply, this is the captain of a US Navy ship. I say again, divert your course. The Canadian says, no. I say again, you divert your course. Then the Americans explode, and the American says, this is the aircraft carrier, USS Lincoln, the second largest ship in the United States Atlantic Fleet. We are accompanied by 3 destroyers, 3 cruisers, and numerous support vessels. I demand that you change your course 15 degrees north, that is 15 degrees north, or countermeasures will be taken to ensure the safety of this ship. Then the Canadian replies, okay, this is the lighthouse. You make the decision. Now, a lot of situations are like that. We are dealing with lighthouses. It's not going anywhere. So we need to learn. When we identify, we know who we are dealing with. We know we are dealing with a lighthouse. Instead of fighting the lighthouse, let me tell you, there is no lighthouse of leadership that cannot be managed. So we need to understand who we are dealing with and learn how to work around that person, because, and I've seen too many examples of people that, everybody said this guy is so bad and all that. It is just that you didn't take time to understand the person. All right. And that's why I've always believed in the principle of seek first to understand, then to be understood. Seek first to understand, then to be understood. You'll be amazed at how many conflicts you avoid just that way. And then my parting shot finally is that I believe self-management, is crucial. I don't want us to leave this space just believing that the next person has to do something. Self-management. Many people absorb information based on their own personal experiences, based on their own personal issues. And so you need, look, when I first got married, I've been married now for 28 years. When I first got married, okay, I noticed there was a period when we would just wake up. I have not done anything wrong. I have not even had time to offend anybody. And then my wife is just angry with me. Margaret, I have not offended anybody. I've not spoken a word. She's just angry. And that anger will go on. Hey. So I was really confused that nobody told me this is how marriage is. That you can wake up one morning and without doing anything, your wife is angry with you. But my background is in social statistics. So I began to see a pattern that this thing happens at a particular time of the month, every month. So when I begin to see those signals of somebody who is just angry with me for nothing, I say, it's that time of the month. Then she will laugh and say, go away, And so managing myself, I think, is so important to make sure that I want to understand first before I am understood. I believe if we adopt some of these things on a personal level, it will really help us. I am done. I hope this has added some value. Thank you.
Margaret, your microphone.
Yeah.
Margaret, microphone.
Margaret, your microphone.
Your microphone. Margaret? Okay, let me just get her.
Unmute.
Thank you. So, yeah, thank you. Thank you. Dr. Ari, thank you so much. Indeed, we are so inspired. I didn't even realize that your time was up. Thank you. This was phenomenal. There is a question that came through that from Lucy that what do you think Dr. Ari is the chairman and his effectiveness? Are those two inversely proportional? I don't know. I don't want to respond right now, but I am very much inspired by the lighthouse. I believe many of us are lighthouses, and so we are saying, make your decision. This is me. I am the chairman, so make your decision. Thank you very much, Dr. Our panelists, our participants are quite excited. I can see our chat portal is on fire. And Reverend, I can see you're still on standby. I don't know whether you are able to see those questions, but the first one I would like you to respond to. It was more of a comment, comment question, talk about conflict that came from the question that came from Sultan. Say something about that, Reverend, as Dr. Ari takes a breather, and then we will be back with him. Thank you again, Dr. Ari. Karibu, Reverend.
What is the question, Margaret?
That Sultan said this conflict is multifaceted. Is it true?
Yes, yeah. It is multifaceted. There are very many factors that play into a conflict. The beauty about mediation is people are given a chance to express themselves. And you are surprised at some of the things that will come. You didn't have the vaguest idea about it. It is probably something you said or something you did not do. Somebody may be angry with you for no reason at all. But yes, I am agreeing with that comment that conflict is multifaceted. And what helps in mediation is to give everybody a chance to express their view. It is in all that talk that you discover the item, the issue that needs to be dealt with. We call that up with that. If you don't come up with that one item or two or whatever the number which need to be sorted out, you have not resolved the problem. So I'm agreeing with that, that conflict is multifaceted.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Sultan. You have had Reverend's response. Dr. Ari, would you want to comment on the age of the chairman vis-a-vis his effectiveness? This is a question coming from Lucy.
I have positions on this, but one of the things is wisdom and age. It's not synonymous. You can be, the word we're looking for is maturity. is not a function of age. However, that being said, there's the advantage that, you know, the age and the experience and all that it ought to come with. Let me put it that way. It's that experience and where that it ought to come with, but it doesn't always come with it, you know. So I think besides age, I think we should that can help us, and we define exactly what we want the role of the guy, you know, what the role of the guy is supposed to be, and then we judge against that and not necessarily against age. Because again, when you look at some of the top companies in the world today, some of those guys, when they were starting off, they would not even have been allowed to go to adult church. They would have been sent to Sunday school, you know, and then they build multi-billion-dollar organizations, you know. But talking of the role of the chairman, I agree that experience and exposure are very important, but we should not peg it on a number.
Okay. Thank you very much, Terry, for that response. I have Dr. Edward. I believe the Reverend, you might be able to say something about. He's asking, Reverend, don't you those with well, a position?
Yes, I am. We said at the beginning of my that there are many ways of dealing with conflict, and one of those, the law of the jungle, where you have the survival of the fittest. If that is resolving conflict on your board, definitely you will have a problem, because you will always have people who are stronger than others. They speak louder, even when they have absolutely nothing to say. They will say it very loudly. Now, that. And that's why mediation is important, because when people come to the table, you, the mediator, must not allow anybody to dominate the process. And there's something we call power balance. If there's a chairman and a hapless board member, you make sure both of them are given enough time to state their case when the other one is completely quiet. That one all the time. So that you then balance the power. Otherwise, if you don't balance the power, you end up with hard all the time. So there is a provision and a solution for that.
Yeah, totally, Reverend. And just to add my voice to that, it is in mediation that even the weaker gets heard. Because in court, it is the one with the more expensive lawyer that will be heard more. And so thank you. We have somebody who is appreciating the panelists, Rose, and also asking for their presentations. So James, I believe you're on top of that. The question that you responded to about the chairman and his age was from Lucas, not Lucy. My apologies to you, Lucas. I could see LUC, and I might have added Y instead of AS. 1,000 apologies, Lucas, but your question was responded to nevertheless. We are going to the tail end, and James, you will let me know when you want to come in with the wrap-up. We do have a lot of positive comments coming through, and Reverend, you still have one more question. I think Sultan is not letting you off the hook yet. He says that you suggested that some of the causes of conflict is due to member incompetence.
Yes.
He goes on to say, I believe he wants your thoughts on some of the boards that are inherently from their structure, they're affected not with COVID-19 but with incompetence. I don't know. Reverend, please say something about that before I bring in Daktari for another response.
Yeah, state corporations and state boards do not have to have inherently wrong people. What I think the appointing people ought to understand is if you have incompetent people, you are down. So there must be very many good reasons for the state to want to appoint people, and some of them are legitimate reasons. My only appeal is that you appoint people who can perform. That is called merit. Or to bring someone else is first to work against them because they will be lost in that board most of this and generally undermine the work of that corporation. It's a terrible thing to do. But of course, we have all manner of arguments like the face of the country, or is it the face of Kenya? We must have this number of, I don't know. All I'm saying is look for someone who can perform. The boards don't have to be inherently incompetent.
Yeah, thank you, Reverend. I believe they are also here.
Margaret, do I say something about agreement, whether the mediation agreement is binding? Is mediation agreement a binding? Now, if you're doing quote mandated mediation or mediation, the mediation agreement, once it is signed by the disputants and the mediator, is presented back to the court, and it is issued out as the order of the court. And therefore, there's no, the matter is over, and there's no appeal against or in a mediation agreement. Now, the one outside of the court, we do have a serious problem in this country, and I think in most other countries for that matter, that we have been made to believe our default method of conflict resolution is the court. And what we get from the court, the judge, many bring that thinking into mediation. It's totally wrong. Mediation is voluntary. Mediation assumes integrity. Mediation assumes that those two parties who have come to the table have decided to resolve their problem within a mediation process. In the end, you have a win-win outcome. They can shake hands and the matter is over. But we were not trained that way. We are still looking for that judge. What we need to help people understand is the workings of mediation. Agreement is binding because the two people chose to come and they negotiated their own personal interest. However, we are going to go through a process to get there. There's a court provision, a legal mechanism where you can take that agreement through a legal process, then to have it registered for those who may think that they need a judgment of the court. But the agreement in itself, in the ideal situation, is binding.
Yeah, Reverend? Reverend, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for those insights. Of course, earlier you had mentioned that mediation is confidential. And
Yes.
this, in my view, is really positive things. Is a positive thing because most of the conflict, we don't want it playing out there in the media. And so it's confidentiality to add on to all the other good things that you have said about mediation, in my view, is important for the business. Daktari, are you there?
Yes.
Yeah. In my 21 years of boardroom experience, I have seen more lighthouses than destroyer carriers, and those have done more damage to what the boards would otherwise achieve. I have a question here coming from Dr. Rosemary, who is saying, would you say more? Would you say a bit more about the lighthouses in our boardroom, and what would be the way forward, especially in a situation of conflict? Dr. please.
Thank you. You see, when we are talking about the lighthouses, we need to understand that what we are managing at that level, we are managing egos.
Yeah.
Okay. So now, and we need to look at the bigger picture. These are many of these egos, they thrive on the fight because they want to win. So the best way to deal with some of these egos is not to give them the fight, but to find a way of you understand this ego. And one thing I have learned in dealing with human beings, there is no ego that cannot be managed. Look at the most evil kings throughout history. There were always people who knew exactly what button to press and how to manage those egos. And so I think that it is important and I don't know if people teach it, the management of egos. I'm serious, it is a course on its own. I teach a lot of that because one of the things I found is that as you grow, there is a trajectory of growth. When you first come in, you are accepted, you are employed, your first employment is your academic papers. Now, you do that for a while, then it becomes your technical know-how. Then as you grow again, you've been faithful in that, then the next level is the management of projects. Now, when you have done that, the next level is you are now managing teams, okay? But your growth, you're still growing. So management of projects, management of teams, then at the point when you are now managing the teams, what you are managing at that level is the management of temperaments, okay? Now, when you have been faithful in managing those temperaments, to make people that like you, people that don't agree with you, and you get people to deliver, the next level is when you are now leading leaders, okay? So at this point, you are now managing leaders, you're head of departments, you have, that's managing of egos. And at the top, you now have stakeholder management.
Yes.
So those are different levels of management. But you see, the fact that we call it management means it can be managed. And the first step in managing an ego is taking time to understand that ego. And I think many of us do not take time to understand the ego that we are dealing with. And also, we don't understand that this guy thrives on the fight. He's not going anywhere. He's a lighthouse. He's not going anywhere. If I continue trying to fight, he will thrive on the fight. It will delay too many things. So it is in my best interest and in the best interest of the organization to study that ego, learn how to manage that ego, and defeat that ego. You know, it's been said that wars are fought by soldiers, but are won by thinkers. And I think that is the position we should take.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much, Daktari. I believe our participants have benefited greatly listening to you, two wonderful panelists. I want to now give each of you a minute to give your closing remarks and your final thoughts. Our takeaway as we come to the tail end of this wonderful webinar. I want again to start with you, Reverend.
Thank you, Margaret. Thank you, participants, for the opportunity to listen and to share this moment with you. I should say this: peace is the most sought after commodity, and peace will not be found in the legal process. I recommend very highly that we take every opportunity to promote mediation in our countries, not just in the boardroom, but also in the bedroom and wherever else that we may be found. Because without peace, very little will happen. So was like mediation right across. So let's take every opportunity to help our companies, to use mediation in our homes, among our friends, and even in politics. The biggest problems in politics can be sorted out by sitting down and talking, not hiding and burying hatchets. They get unburied before you know it. Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend. It is an interesting time to mention politics and how much they need mediation. And we pray that it shall be well. And what we are hearing here today can get out there and benefit us all as Kenyans. Lucy, I can see you. Sorry, Kawira, I can see you are commenting on Daktari's ego management approach, and it got me thinking that in the boardroom we might sometimes need 2 seats for some members, one for them and one for their ego. Daktari, please come in with your final comments.
All right, thank you. Well, I started by saying, that it's so great to talk after the boss. So, and I said, like Reverend said. So I will also end, like Reverend said, about the importance of peace. But again, let us be sure that what we have is true peace and not an environment where expression has been contained. That's my part.
Yeah, thank you, our panelists. At this point, before James, you come in, I would like to appreciate the role that has been played by our CEO behind the scenes, making sure that this is possible. Our chairman, Engineer Duncan Water, making sure that we remain engaged and bringing on board such wonderful panelists. The IoD staff, James, Kawira, I know you are doing a lot behind the scenes, including coming to unmute when the microphone goes mute. Thank you very much, everybody, our panelists, our participants. It has been a wonderful time engaging on this important topic. The boardroom. Thank you very much. Once again, I am Margaret Chege, the chair of the Membership and Publicity Committee of the IoD board. Asanteni sana and have a wonderful day ahead.
Thank you.
James?
Hi, Peter.
Yes. Thank you very, very much, Margaret, for being so well planned in terms of engaging our speakers and facilitators for the day. I am so grateful for you creating time to actually be here with us, the office. I also want to thank Reverend profoundly for you always making time whenever you're needed. Of course, for you, it's always chap. Disputes will always be everywhere, even in matatus. So there's opportunity there to solve a lot of things. Dr. Wale, asante sana. I mean, while fought by soldiers, victory can only be achieved by thinkers. That has been very good and insightful conversation that we've had today. Our next session, as you can see on the shared screen to all the participants, will be next week. Next week is strategy week. So we'll be looking at a lot of things in matter strategy. We'll have a strategy session on Wednesday, and we'll also have a strategy session on Friday. So please look out for your emails when we have this particular conversation going down. On your screens, I would love to share a poll. Kindly, if you don't mind, to all our participants, kindly, if you don't mind, please take a poll on the question we are asking all of us. We would love to know what your expectations or preferences are when it comes to running programs and trainings. So kindly allow us to get your feedback on that. And at the end of this particular session, as we log out, kindly note that we will have a session, or rather a survey at the end of the session. Please take your time and answer the survey honestly, just to rate the speakers for today, to rate the session for today. A lot of things have come out of this particular session. We would look at engaging you more on at least even a training program, even a one-day session just for boards to really appreciate and know that in the next new normal, we have to journey together and not apart. Otherwise, we will break so many families and so many organizations, which basically are families going forward. So thank you very much. Please take note of that. And we appreciate the assistance. We appreciate your participation. And we are grateful and look forward to having you in our next session. At this juncture, I would like to thank you all and wish you a very, very beautiful afternoon. God bless us all, and let's look forward to a fruitful weekend. Asanteni sana. Dr. Wale, Reverend, CVS Margaret, and to all the participants.